The true history of Medusa.
Medusa, one of the most famous monster figures, known as a Gorgon. Something about her that most people don't know is that she was actually represented by a winged figure in the beginning, in the real stories. Her most famous characteristic was her long flowing hair that was turned into serpents. Medusa was the sister of Agria, Echidna, and Lydon. They were also Gorgons, the daughter of the sea gods Phorcys and Ceto. Her name likely derives from the ancient Greek word that means guardian. Medusa was not a monster at birth. She had the unfortunate experience of being transformed into the most repulsive of her siblings. I'm going to try to tell you the real story, how from an innocent girl, she was transformed into a villain. I'll also take you back in ancient history to see what relationships she had with other gods and goddesses, and what her life was like. In ancient Greek art, her face was feminine and composed, and in other depictions, her face was monstrous. Either way, she was a formidable persona, known all over Greece. In fact, ancient potteries have her depiction all over. Even the great Gianni Versace had his symbol, his logo, the head of Medusa. The theory of what happened to Medusa is up for debate. You see, I have a different theory on what her history was based on my research. Her name and character almost created to ward off any others that had evil intentions. Like an evil eye to ward off another evil eye. She is very known for her famous death by the hands of the hero Perseus. But was he a hero? Perseus beheaded Medusa with the help of Hermes and Athena. It was a plot. Hesiod's Theogony has the most ancient story about Medusa's death. He mentions her decapitation and her children, Pegasus, the winged horse. Yes, I bet you didn't know that. Pegasus, the winged horse, was Medusa's child. Her other child was a giant chrysaor who sprung from her neck. The complicated nature of the Gorgon Medusa had began being put in writing in the 8th century BC. Was a tale told mouth to mouth within the Greek generations. So this was a story that was far more ancient. In fact, it can go all the way back to the first Anunnaki gods. Medusa was a lovely woman, known for her beautiful features and her charm. Her lush long hair was the envy of many, including the goddess Athena. Medusa was so beautiful that even the gods were enchanted by her beauty. Medusa served at the temple of Athena, the goddess of knowledge and wisdom. As all the other temple girls, they promised to remain virgins while serving the goddess Athena. Athena was one of the only 3 goddesses to remain a virgin, and chastity was a very big deal for them. So while Medusa is serving Athena at the temple, she is noticed by mortals and gods. Her beauty was just overwhelming for anyone that would lay eyes on her. Medusa ignored all of the attention she received. She was very humble until one day, Poseidon, seeing her in all her beauty, could not refrain from having her, and he made his wishes very clear. His relationship then was strained with Athena. She did not want Medusa to be involved with him. She was now a priestess of Athena for her temple. Both gods were great and significant in Greek mythology, but Poseidon was most definitely the most significant of the two. He was notorious for his volatile personality, creating floods or earthquakes at his command. Poseidon was attracted by Medusa's beauty. Since he feared no one, he had no problem going to the temple of Athena to seduce the beautiful Medusa. In some versions of her story, Medusa engaged in the advances of Poseidon. But in the ancient stories, it was much more sinister. Poseidon, being a wrathful and powerful god, had no problem intimidating the poor, young, naive Medusa into submission. You'll find contradicting stories in history. Some stories will say that she resisted him and he took her by force. And other stories will say that she reciprocated his advances. But if that were the case, she would not be a priestess of Athena. She would not be serving at the temple. Medusa and Poseidon have a love affair that produced 2 children. So the truth here is, of the relations between Poseidon and Medusa, that Poseidon waited for one day for Athena, the goddess, not to be on guard and not paying attention. She was busy with other things. Poseidon took advantage of her absence and went to the temple behind her back. He observed the beautiful Medusa performing her tasks and chores, and when his lust grew so much that he could not resist her, he pounced and had passionate relations with her on the floor of the temple of Athena. Athena arrives and discovers that her temple has been desecrated. At this point, Athena, that was not stronger nor more powerful than Poseidon, could not stand up against him. So she turns and looks at Medusa and blames the girl. The goddess Athena was furious and took everything on her priestess. Poseidon, instead of defending Medusa, he takes off. He doesn't want to be bothered by these female fits of rage, he says. Medusa runs back to the sea, whereupon her sisters come running in her aid. The Gorgon sisters unite and defend their sister Medusa against the wrath of Athena. This is when Athena understands that she might have a problem now with all of the Gorgon sisters. So to avoid this battle, she turns to Medusa and says that she is now cursed. She curses her with a head infested of serpents. Athena then gives her mortal life. Medusa is no longer immortal. And not only this, she is so enraged that she doesn't want Medusa to seduce any other man ever. So she curses her eyes, that every person that lays their eyes upon Medusa's eyes will turn to stone now. This punishment transforms Medusa in a monster that was cut off from the world of men. She could literally never come near another man again. Athena sounds really evil, but she wasn't done yet. Athena's punishment was so harsh that she decided to even transform her body so that she could never have physical contact without hurting anyone ever again, forcing her to become this outcast of society. Medusa was terribly upset because she could never engage with others without hurting them. She wasn't a bad person ever. In all of her history of her life, she was always a devout priestess, servant of Athena. Certainly didn't deserve this harsh punishment. According to some versions of the story, she was sent to live on a lonely island where she would be all alone. Medusa was now excluded by everyone that knew of her misfortune. But we have to remember, Medusa was always a Gorgon, which possessed magical powers in per se. So in some of these other versions, the reason she can transform men into stone was not because of Athena's curse to her eyes, but because it was a Gorgon power. It was an ability they had to magically transform who they looked upon into stone. Medusa now resides in this cave on this forgotten island, in this mysterious, faraway island. And anyone that dared enter this cave was immediately transformed into stone. The story that a lot of us hear was created to instill fear and make her out to be this maleficent person. But if we actually go into the stories about her, this is far from her truth. Unfortunately, there were people like me that saw this story coming from a different direction and gave it a fairly new interpretation. And I'll tell you more in the next episode.